Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for The Bonding, which is episode 5 of season 3 of Star Trek The Next Generation. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek The Next Generation, one episode at a time. In this video, I cover the third season episode, The Bonding. So The Bonding is the episode where Lieutenant Worf leads an away team to a planet where the species has destroyed itself in wars hundreds of years ago. However, a remnant explosive goes off, killing a member of his away team, Marla Astor. Now, Marla is survived by his son Jeremy, who's aboard the Enterprise. However, Jeremy's father had also passed away 5 years previous, so he is now doesn't have any parents, and Picard and Troy have to break the news to him that his mother is dead. Worf feels really guilty and wants to help the boy. However, Troy warns that it's too early and that he doesn't know how to process his mother's death. However, then a problem comes on board where there's an energy being alien that lives on the planet that feels guilty for Marla Astor's death, and so they one of the aliens posed as Marla Astor and reveals herself to Jeremy and saying that she's still alive and wants to take Jeremy down to the planet where she can recreate their home on Earth and be the mother to her. And Picard and crew fights the alien. The alien's confused as to why they are fighting her. Then Picard has to explain to her and Jeremy at the same time how human beings need to process death and feel it's just a part of life and it's something that they need to accept, and how Jeremy could not live the rest of his life on this planet because he needs to live a normal life where he has a family and a career and all that. So this convinces the alien, who goes away, and then Worf convinces Jeremy to do the bonding, Klingon ritual in which they will become brothers for life. So, I'm going to talk about my feelings on this episode, my historical feelings on this episode first before I get into the behind-the-scenes stuff, which I feel like anyone who watches like YouTube videos like this is probably already aware of the behind-the-scenes stuff because I just watch a whole bunch of them and they all bring it up. But anyway, let's start with my feelings for this, historical feelings for this episode. My complaint, the thing I don't like about this episode can be summed up in one word: continuity. And this would refer to forward continuity as well as backward continuity. And what I mean by that is that I have a problem attaching myself or feeling any sort of attachment or interest in this episode because there's no backward continuity. The character of Marla Astor is invented for this episode and dies like 30 seconds through the episode, something like that, maybe a minute through the episode. And in fact, we don't even see her until after she's dead. And then we're dealing with the aftermath of this character that we do not know, and how she leaves behind Jeremy Astor, a character that we do not know. And so it's hard for me to feel anything for these characters, which is, there is a bit of irony in there because that's kind of the point of the episode. They bring this up in the conversation with Riker and Data about how they care more about those who died if they're more familiar with it, and they're all asking each other how well you knew that person. And Data even asks, well, shouldn't we care about the death even though we didn't know that person very well? And Riker's like, yeah, maybe it should work that way, but it doesn't. And my answer would be Riker's answer would be my answer to this episode. Maybe I should care about Marla and Jeremy Astor, but I don't, because I don't know them. You haven't showed them to me before. I think it would have been more powerful if, like, and the thing is you would go with, well, Next Generation television at this time was episodic. They don't really do these serialized storylines like they do nowadays. My answer to that, or my response to that, would be bullshit. I guess I'm trying to think, because maybe at this stage in season 3, Next Generation hasn't done it that much. It did it with Q. We've seen Q 3 times. It will constantly bring characters back. We've seen Gomez twice. Miles O'Brien, who is not a main character we've seen on the show multiple times, they kept bringing him back. So that Miles is actually, who was actually in this episode, is a good example for that. So bullshit. We see reoccurring characters all the time, and they could have had Marla Astor, maybe even Jeremy Astor, being reoccurring characters who appeared before to preamble this episode. If anything, like, they don't have to be like Miles O'Brien and been there for like a year. They could have been like maybe in 1 or 2 episodes. Like, this is something that other episodic shows like Deep Space Nine and Voyager actually pulled off very well. For example, in the episode In the Hands of the Prophets, we see the character of Neela, I believe her name is. We find out that, spoilers for that episode, we find out that she is corrupt and working for, Vedic Wynn, a very corrupt person, and is trying to execute someone. Now, the reason why that revelation actually hits a bit harder is because we know who Neela is, because we saw her in 2 previous episodes. We saw her in Duet and in Dramatis Persona, or whatever it's called. And so, even though she was just a background character who says, "Oh, sir," or whatever, it's like, hey, I know who that person is. She wouldn't be the spy, would she? And then, not to mention Eddington, who was a recurring character, and so when it's revealed he was a Maquis spy, spoilers again, when it was revealed he was a Maquis spy, it hits us harder because we know who Eddington is. And then, Voyager, and again, spoilers for Voyager Season 1, the character of Seska is someone we saw in the background, who had lines, who reappeared, who had stuff to do. And so when it's revealed she's actually a Cardassian spy, that hits hard. So, and even in this day and age in TNG, they were doing recurring characters. So don't tell me that, it's too episodic. Bullshit. Even at this point in stage, they were doing reoccurring characters. So even if you say, like, you don't have, because this is early season 3, so let's say season 2 is done and you didn't have these characters. Even if they had Marla Astor in like 2 episodes, say that she appeared in the background with like a couple lines in Ensigns of Command and The Survivors. So just 2 episodes before, just like they did with Neela, or maybe we saw Jeremy or something. But maybe Marla would be more things. She was just in the background. She's just like, "Aye, sir," had a couple of lines. And so when she died in this episode, you're like, "Hey, it's that person that I know. Hey, it's the guy from the other movie." No, you would be like, "Hey, it's that person I know from the other episode." And you'd be like, "No, I know this person. I know who it is. And now she's dead." Well, shit, she has a son. And they could have maybe even revealed that in one of those 2 episodes. Be like, my son, or whatever. Or here's my son. Or just cameo Jeremy. And then it would have had a lot more impact. Whereas and that is one of the main reasons, because when I was growing up, I never liked this episode. Watching it now, I'm starting to appreciate it more. And it's hitting me harder. But growing up, and part of that is maturing and getting older, and I could kind of understand the emotions that this episode's going for. But growing up, I had no attachment to it. And that's not to say that emotional episodes didn't affect me. They did. I liked some really powerful emotional episodes affected me, although granted more when I grew older, but still. Even when I grew older, was an older teenager, when I learned to appreciate episodes like The Offspring and Inner Light more, I still didn't like this episode. And part of that was, it was hard for me to get attached because they were expecting familiarity from characters that I didn't know at all. They were expecting me to be emotionally invested in characters that they did not explore or develop at all. And so that really distanced me from it. So I remember finding the storyline with Jeremy trying to grieve over his mother boring because I had no investment in it. Now, as I said recently, I've come to appreciate it a bit more than I did when I was younger. But at the time, I was just like, who are these people and why should I care? Which, again, is kind of ironic to the point of the episode. And then there's the forward continuity, which bothers the hell out of me still to this day. And what I mean by that is at the end of the episode, and you might know I emphasize this in my description of the episode. At the end of the episode, Worf bonds himself to Jeremy. The whole point of the episode is Worf is like, I want to bond with Jeremy. I want to do the bonding. We'll be like brothers. Please let me do this. And they do this, and they have this Klingon ceremony, and it's supposed to be this great relieving thing for Jeremy. And he was like, we are now brothers. And then we never see or hear of Jeremy ever again. Now, do not come at me with this bullshit. Oh, Next Generation was episodic at the time. You gotta understand, they're not gonna follow up on this. To which, again, I say bullshit. And this time I will cite Alexander, who was introduced as Worf's son, and absolutely did follow up on it. And in fact, they keep reoccurring and bringing him back because they're not going to pretend that Worf doesn't have a son when he does. But it's perfectly okay to pretend that he doesn't have like this adopted brother or whatever he's supposed to be looking after and supposed to be part of his family, who vanishes out of thin air after this episode. So bull ass fucking shit, bitch. Sorry, throwing out all the curse words, but bullshit. That it's just episodic. Why would they wouldn't show him again? That is not true. Not true. I mean, they might as well not even show Wesley again. I mean, come on. I mean, some people complain that they didn't mention or talk about Pulaski again, but who gives a fuck about Pulaski? She's not relevant anymore. Worf has an adopted brother. That is way more relevant, and yes, poof, vanishes out of thin air. So every time I'm watching that scene, when the two of them bond, and this has been historically true ever since I saw this episode, which is part of the reason why I used to not like this episode, it annoys the hell out of me watching this scene. Because I know that he's just going to disappear out of thin air, which makes the scene pointless. It makes it useless. It makes it lack any meaning, any emotional attachment, knowing that it means nothing because this boy is never mentioned or seen ever again. So why even have this scene? It's like it never even happened. So that is my major issue with this episode. Continuity. Forward and backwards. No backwards continuity and no forwards continuity. It might as well not exist. And you might be like, "Ooh, you could say that about a lot of episodes, Mark. There's a lot of episodes that are episodic." But yeah, there are a lot of episodes in TNG, and especially TOS, that are episodic, but they're structured so it's okay for them to be episodic. Like, you don't need to talk about Time Squared ever again. You don't need to bring up the fact that Picard met himself or whatever, because that's not really relevant. Like, that doesn't, you can, and stuff like, in other examples, like, you don't have to talk about the time when you went and met the Takan Empire and the Ferengi were acting like hyperactive gerbils. Like, you don't need to mention this shit again, although Shades of Grey did bring it up. Thank you very much, fucking clip show. But anyway, you don't need to mention that stuff again, because it doesn't imply something that should be long-lasting. Worf bonding himself to a boy and saying we are now brothers, that fucking does. That implies something that needs to be followed up on. And again, don't tell me TNG never followed up on shit like that, because they most definitely did. Alexander, Barclay, Leah Brom. I mean, there's so many, Vash, there's so many things. Traveler, there's so many things they did follow up on. And this is something that screamed that it needed to be followed up on, and it never, ever was. So why does it even exist? And I guess I should mention that there was a B canon novel that brought him back when he was like 18 or 19 or something, and he met Worf again, and they're acting like Worf has been following his life and career, and he was like, oh, how are you, blood brother, or whatever. But I'm like, nice try, B canon, nice try, but you can't make up for the fact that the A canon dropped the fucking ball in this one. Anyway, so I mentioned I'd talk about the behind the scenes. So here's something I doubt that anyone watching this doesn't know, but in case you don't, this was the first episode written by Ronald D. Moore. This is Ronald D. Moore's introduction to the Star Trek universe. In fact, you might know this even from watching my own videos, because I talked about this in the video I did when I analyzed the writing of season 3. I did a whole hour-long video. I was talking about commenting on the writing situation in the writing room of season 3 of TNG. And one of the major things is Ronald D. Moore's introduction. It's a story I've heard like dozens of billions of times. But in it, I explained that. So the other thing I want to be clear is this is not Michael Pillar's first episode, which I've heard some people state, because he was actually, it's the first episode that he was involved in the beginning of the writing process of the script. Well, in a way, because the scripts for the first 4 episodes were already written when he joined, because there was Michael Wagner, but then Michael Wagner quit. However, the scripts for the first episodes were not filmed yet. Michael Pillar was still involved in revising those first 4 scripts, especially Evolution, which he was heavily involved in. He wrote the teleplay for it. But he was not there at the start of the process. Those scripts were already in progress when he joined, so he needed to start on a 5th script, because that hadn't been started yet. So the first thing he did, since he was already behind schedule, was go to the slush pile. And I talked about the slush pile before, just a giant pile of script ideas that were just sitting around. And the main one he found that he really liked and really wanted to make was this one, The Bonding, written by an novice unknown writer, Ronald D. Moore, who had toured the set a year previous during the production of Times Squared, and had left that script there. And the Roddenberry's assistant actually liked that script, so constantly put it towards the top of the slush pile. And so he read that and went to get it made. Now, Roddenberry rejected that script at first because it was about a young boy staying in the holodeck who was, grieving for the loss of his mother, so he's using the holodeck to recreate his mother, and the crew was trying to pull him away from that because it's unhealthy. And Roddenberry rejected that because he said kids don't grieve in the 24th century, which is stupid. But he said nobody grieves in the 24th century, which is dumb. But Pillar, and this is what I talked about in the sort of writing situation, this was differentiated Pillar from Maurice Hurley and many of the other writers who worked on the show, is that instead of being like, oh, well, fuck you, Roddenberry, and Michael Wagner, by the way, quit because Roddenberry was acting like this towards him, but instead of being like, oh, fuck you, Roddenberry, how dare you destroy my creative vision, he went like, okay, let's work around this. And so his workaround was to be like, okay, so people in the 24th century don't grieve, but let's explore that. Like, why don't they grieve? And let's say that there's an alien, rather than a kid going to holodeck, let's say there's an alien, because Roddenberry is always okay with aliens interfering with humans. That was always the solution. And so let's say there's an alien pretending to be his mother, and this forces the crew to have to get him to learn to grieve and move past his mother's death. And for some reason, Roddenberry was like, yeah, I like that solution. Let's go. So he okayed it. He was okay with it. And, I heard someone say that Roddenberry didn't really have control over TNG in the third season, which is not true. That I've been reading about it, and he still had firm control over the final okay of the scripts throughout season 3. Maybe towards the end of season 3, he was dropping off a bit, and by the time we got to season 4, it wasn't a factor anymore. But the start of season 3 is still very much a factor. So anyway, or at least from what I read. But anyway, which were direct quotes from people who worked on the show. But anyway, so yeah, they convinced him to. A lot the writing staff, mainly Melinda Snodgrass, rewrote the script and rejiggered it. And I think Ronald D. Moore was slightly involved in this process, I believe, or maybe he was. I'm trying to remember. Maybe it wasn't until the Defector he was involved. I think maybe in this episode he wasn't involved at all, and they just rewrote it. So his originals, what he wrote, was actually very different from what we see, because it was rewritten mainly by Melinda Snodgrass, but probably the whole staff, because they workshopped a lot of these episodes, which is how they got written very quickly in season 3, because they were so behind the gun, or under the gun, however you say it. So they reworked the script so that it was aliens. I'm not saying it's aliens, but it's aliens. So yeah, this is something I've been pointing out as we've been going through season 3, is that the writing is just so much better. Like, the characters are written so much better. Like, you got a lot of great character moments in this episode where we focus more on the characters like Picard and Troy and Wesley, and this is what Michael Piller himself said that he brought to the show. He brought good character writings, and that he was a character guy and not really a sci-fi guy, and I think that totally shows, and this is what the show absolutely needed. And of course, it was a group effort for everyone involved in rewriting this script, like Melinda Snodgrass, but yeah, they were happy with Ronald D. Moore and what he did with the script. So they invited him back again, and eventually he wrote The Defector, which, as I said, I think that's when they brought him back to be involved in the breaking down process of the script, and eventually he became a writer, a regular staff writer on staff. So, and the rest is history, as they say. And of course, Ronald D. Moore, you probably all know or heard the name. He's classic writer, producer of TNG. He became one of the most important writers of TNG in the later years, and then became one of the most important writers in the later years of DS9, season 3 through 7. And then, became the showrunner for Battlestar Galactica. Now he's the showrunner for Outlander. But anyway, so yeah. He, important guy, and his career all started here because Michael Piller liked this script, and this is where his career began, which is very interesting. But I always found it weird when I found out this was Ronald D. Moore's first script, because I didn't really like this episode that much, and I was like, this is where he got his start. But a couple things, when I think about it, a couple things about it make sense. First of all, it's a lot more emotionally dark, which is his style, than a lot of the previous episodes of TNG. It's very emotional, deals with death and really heavy stuff. And also, well, they changed his original idea around a lot, and it was his first script. So it actually makes sense that he would get better, especially once he, joined the staff and learned to work with the team and learn from the other more experienced writers, that his later stuff would improve, which it did. So actually it does make perfect sense that this would be his first script. So yeah, that is another interesting thing about this episode. So I think you can tell. So when I just watched this episode now, really was trying to analyze it and what sort of issues I had it with, because there were a lot of great scenes in this episode. There was the scene with Wesley and Beverly when Beverly was saying, "Oh, Troy would like you to talk to Jeremy." He's like, "What for?" Like, it was like really well written. And again, we're getting back to how well, and of course, the performances were very good from Gates McFadden and Will Wheaton. Of course, they're going to be. If the writing's better, the performances are always better. So that's where it starts. And again, I sort of contribute Pillar and Snodgrass and the whole writing team for writing characters better and pulling shit together. But anyway. Yeah, that scene was great. Troy was actually very great throughout the entire episode. This is probably the first episode in the show where Troy, you really saw her behaving as a counselor and doing her fucking job, right? I think the previous writers did not use Troy very well, and I think that's very evident. A lot of people note that throughout the series, but here... And this is another thing I actually noticed with season 3 as a whole, that they're using Troy better. They're making the fact that she actually has powers relevant because she brings it up. She uses her empathic powers throughout this episode because she senses that Picard is this is weighing heavily on him, and he's having difficulty telling Jeremy, and he's sensing what Wesley is feeling. She's sensing what Jeremy is feeling, and how best to use that, and then counseling Picard and how to handle it, or counseling Worf, who she can sense is very important. He's very obsessed with this, and she was trying to guide him in the best way to propose this bonding thing. I mean, this is really good stuff. This is written so well for Troy. And of course, once Marina Sirtis is actually handed something good, she does it well, which I talked about in my Revisited for The Survivors, where her performance was fucking amazing. Knocked it out of that park in Survivors, where she was playing Going Insane. That was so good. And again, she delivers the quality. But that's why I'm really against these people who say Marina Sirtis' acting sucked. It sucked when the writing sucked. When the writing was good, it was good. But anyway, so... Yeah, the way they handled Troy was great. We had the scene with Troy and Picard was great. The scene with Troy and Worf is great. The scene where Picard told Jeremy about the death of his mother was great. There was a lot of good stuff in this episode. But then we get to I don't know, the Jeremy Astor actor. He's a child actor, but child actors are, hit or miss. It's harder to find quality. They always say don't work with animals or kids. So I will excuse it, but yeah, he's not the best. Not the best. He does it okay. Not the worst actor I've seen, but yeah, I do think it could have been better. I'll just put it that way. But granted, it was very weird having to work within the Roddenberry box of him not grieving, but I actually found in the end it kind of makes sense that he was trying to hide his emotions. He was trying to be brave, and they talked about how Wesley did the same thing. So in the end, the Roddenberry box doesn't bother me. In fact, Michael Pillar, what he said is something I quoted in a video I did about the writing. He said he thought the script was better because of the Roddenberry box. He thought that what they did with their final draft was better than Ronald D. Moore's original idea, which I've heard a lot of people say otherwise. And I don't know. I'm not sure how. It's hard to say how I'd feel because I didn't read the original script, so I don't know exactly how his original idea. I just know the basic outline. And when I first heard about the basic outline of a kid grieving in a holodeck, I was like, yeah, that's not very good. I think what they did with the alien was actually much better. But when I think about it, maybe the grieving in the holodeck thing would have been, but it's hard to say. I'm kind of torn on it, and not having read the original script, it's hard to say. I tend to agree that having the alien involved is better, because just having a boy moping in a holodeck recreating his mother, that just seems, something very simplistic about it that's not very interesting. But I don't know, I could be wrong. As I said, I didn't actually read the script. But one thing is clear after rewatching this episode is I think the alien storyline could have been handled better too. Now I've heard some other opinions that the episode went downhill once they introduced the alien plot. I don't agree. I like what the alien plot did. I like the fact that, and I think it's really creepy too, when the alien call Marla, Marla, or was it fake Marla, Marla? When fake Marla appears, the way she does is very creepy. How he's watching this, little poor. I actually thought it was really great how they showed him watching this thing with her and like the cat and stuff. I think that was really well handled. But the way they introduced her, where she's like he's watching the thing and she's going Jeremy in the recording, and then Famarla appears right around the corner saying that the exact same way as the recording, saying Jeremy. Like, that is fucking creepy. You're like, what in the everlasting hell? And also the way that that Jeremy was confusing, like this is rough. It made the episode a bit more emotionally powerful, that he was having to deal with this very difficult, very confusing situation. Again, they write Picard so much better. It's like instant. This is what I'm saying. The change from season 2 to season 3 being so much better was instant. Picard is like such a better, more rounded, way better written, way dynamic, way more interesting character, like instantly in season 3. Instantly. That's why I'm saying fucking the change between season 2 and 3 was night and day. Like, season 3 is definitely the growing the beard moment. But anyway, instantly. Because I couldn't imagine even season 2, let alone season 1 Picard, being as dynamic and interesting and understanding as he was in this episode, where he was like, where he goes, hello, when Jeremy's walking down the corridor with his mother, his fake mother, and Picard says, hello, Jeremy, how are you doing? Are you afraid? And he's like, no, sir. And he's like, okay, maybe a little. He's like, that's understandable. It's understandable. This is some very frightening things happening. Like, that's a very, like, smart, dynamic, understanding character. Whereas season 2 or season 1 Picard would have been like, oh, it's a child. Pfft, get the child away from me. So, yeah, Picard's character is so much better. But anyway, I'm sorry, I'm getting caught up on just how much better season 3 is than season 2. It's like, I've never seen another show, not even Enterprise, that went through such a drastic change, like overnight or over season, I should say. It's just continuing to astound me, especially paying close attention to the smaller details like this. But anyway, what was I talking about? The alien thing. So it was interesting that it was an interesting storyline. So I think they used the alien storyline well, because it created this weird situation that was confusing Jeremy. You feel so bad for him because his mother's dead, then she's alive, then she's dead again, now she's alive again. Like, how much would that really fuck you up? Like, if you think about it. So it's a really relatable, really powerful thing. So that's why I think the alien plot would be better than the holodeck plot, because the holodeck is just some guy, some boy being obsessive and recreating. That's not much different than having him watching videos of the mother. Instead of videos as a hologram, but it's essentially the same thing. Having an actual alien be like, I'm your mother and I'm alive again, that is a lot more powerful, in my humble opinion. But the problem I have with the alien storyline is I don't think they explained it well enough. It's obvious to me that they pivoted from the holodeck thing to the alien thing very quickly, and they, of course, didn't have much time to get the script. They gotta get it out, gotta go. And so it's obvious that it's a bit rushed, and they could have explored this a bit more. For example, when they resolved the storyline and they had Picard and Wesley said his story about how he hated Picard, which again, very powerful scene. And Worf was like, let's do the bonding or whatever. And Jeremy confessed he was angry at Worf. And all of this convinced the alien that, okay, you're right. You guys got this handled. We're just interfering, so we'll fuck off now. they didn't sell that to me. It felt like the alien gave up too easily. I think they could have explored these aliens a bit more, because the alien, or fake Marla, for Marla, she was saying like, "Oh, it's our fault that, because the other alien species, the humanoid species that killed themselves, it's, they left, they're responsible for his mother's death, so we need to take responsibility and recreate his mother so it's like she was never dead." And so, and they didn't understand, and I kind of like this part of it. I like that they didn't understand why the Enterprise crew was so resistant to this. Like, why are you trying to stop us? And then I think Picard did sort of explain it, like, especially, I think it was Troy maybe who brought it up. It was like, so what are you going to do when he gets older? What is he going to do for a career, for a family? Like, how are you going to take care of all of his needs? And I do like how they acknowledge that he would feel better for a while, but then eventually it's like, what are you going to do? And she's like, oh, we can provide him friends. And like, what about all this? And plus they'd be fake friends too. So I thought that was good, but I think that the aliens were still convinced a bit easily. And I think it would have been better if the aliens actually said, if fake Marla actually said something before she left. As she was like, oh, and if she explained herself more, as like, maybe asked the Picard more questions before she was completely convinced, and being like, why does this grieving process, or why must this work, or do you really care for him, and can you be a substitute for his mother, and maybe more questions. But and I think they just needed to take more convincing, and maybe just explain more of what the aliens, what their motivations were. And I think that's why some people just hate the alien storyline, is because it could have been fleshed out more, is what I'm saying. Now, I don't hate the alien storyline, because as I said, I think a lot of what they do with it is good stuff. I just think it needed more. So it's like 75% there, but there's like 25% missing, that they just could have done a little bit more to really fully flesh it out and make it work. But for the most part, I think it works. Not even going to talk about the ending scene where Worf becomes his brother again, because it boils my blood just to think about it. I'm sorry, it does. It's a really, really hard thing that I've held against this episode for a long time. But yeah, other than that, I think I pretty much covered everything. Yeah, Troy was great in this episode. Oh yeah, Wesley confessing that he was angry at Picard was an amazing moment. And something that I totally buy, by the way. It doesn't seem retconned in at all. And I love the way that Picard handles this. I love the way he was like, because it's only natural for Wesley to feel this way. And he's not surprised. He's not resentful for Wesley to feeling this way. And in fact, he's using it to help Jeremy understand. And I love how Wesley's experience is what helps Jeremy cope and understand his current situation more. I think that was brilliant. That was all brilliantly done. And who knows if this was in Ronald D. Moore's original script or not. I don't know. But whatever the case may be, I feel like the rewrite really improved the script. Just my guess. Anyway, I would now like to thank all those who supported me on Patreon. It's very much appreciated. It does really help me continue with the channel. I'm very humbled and very thankful for everyone's support. So I'll just give a quick shout out to Rough Paul, Greg Marley, Francisco, Chuck Hooks, Kyrie091, Anthony D. Benedictus, Ricky Medijester, Joel Avals, Alessandro Miguelcio, Norman Buckwald, Stephen Kennedy, Brenton Berg, Allison Fordyce, and Brandon Neal House. Thank you all so very, very much for your support. Now, I do have a few patron comments on this episode. First comment is from Kyrie091, who says, "This episode is the first Trek episode written by Ronald D. Moore. It's so long and boring, however. I wish it had been written by Ronald D. Less." I think is the only real response to that comment. Anyway, next comment is from Norman Buckwald. He says, Ronald D. Moore writes his first script and then gets scolded and put into the Roddenberry box. So instead of an episode that could have truly explored a young one's grieving and uses the holodeck to bring up his mother, he instead deals with an alien entity that unfortunately turns out to not be interesting. Given that, the roles both Wesley and Worf play are pluses, and we finally get to see Counselor Troy truly being a counselor for more than maybe a second with the homemaker in the neutral zone. Still, considering we never see the kid again, maybe if he was still in the ship a year or two from now, this forgotten one may have warned Alexander. Yeah, Worf is a bad dad. We got to bring that up. 6 promising, outstanding mores to come soon out of 10. As I already talked about, I like the alien storyline. Maybe, as I said, maybe it's not all there, but I don't, and it's hard for me to determine whether or not I would think it's better than Ronald D. Moore's original script, but in theory, I find it more interesting. Anyway. We'll get to the next comment, which is from Ricky, who says, this episode in itself is actually quite decent. Definitely not one of the best that Season 3 has to offer, but it's a good character story for Worf and for the guilty conscience of having the kid's mother die under his watch. I actually really like the scenes with Troy and Worf. Thought they were very good and really made it great. I also think this is one of Troy's better episodes. However, I do believe that the original idea of the episode would have been better instead of the alien pretending to be his mother. But what really irritates me is the final scene when Worf and this kid has a ritual and specifically stating that they are now family and close. Even though this scene was touching, it's ultimately absolutely meaningless as we never see or hear about this ever again. In my humble opinion, this needed a follow-up with the kid and Worf. If I judged this episode on itself, I would have given it an 8, possibly a 9, because of the strong scenes of Troy and the kid dealing with the trauma of loss. But the fact that it is never followed up on again brings this episode down a lot, so my rating is a 7 out of 10. And yes, Ricky, I completely agree, totally agree that the fact this was never followed up on does bring this episode down quite a bit. Anyway, next comment is from Brandon Neal Howes, who says, this is a good, very good episode. Marla Astor's death seemed to matter more than that of Tasha Yar. I can't help wondering what would have happened if Tasha had left children behind. Spoilers. No, let's not even get into that. And I hate this trait in early TNG where children have to behave like miniature adults and suppress all emotion. Why were the landmines left lying around? Why didn't the energy aliens remove them all? I appreciate Data asking Riker about reactions to death of the crew members depending on whether they were close friends or not. I'm not sure I agree with Riker's answer, though. I'm not sure whether the energy being impersonating Marla Astor is a distraction from this episode or not. And Picard, of all people, making a speech about how important children are to humans makes me sneer every time I hear it. It is good to see Wesley expressing his resentment at Picard for the latter's part in Jack Crusher's death on an away mission. I love the idea of Worf adopting Jeremy as a brother, but the fact that Jeremy is never seen or mentioned again causes me to drop my rating to 7 cats named Patches out of 10. Yeah, Patches was really cool. Anyway, let's see. There was something. So Brandon asked the question, why were the landmines left lying around? Why didn't the energy aliens remove them all? And the answer to that question is so the episode could happen. Anyway, I think they did deal with Tasha Yar's death. I think the little scene with the funeral scene at the end of Skin of Evil actually did show that it would be very affecting. Now, granted, they didn't really bring it up much after that. They did touch on it a bit on the measurement. You got to mention that. And they bring it up again in this episode, in fact, when Data is talking to Riker, and Data brings up the fact that people aren't as affected, or that he's not affected as much as he was when Tasha died. And he's like, I don't feel her absence as much. And I wanted to say to Data, well, that's because you weren't around her as much, so she's not absent from your life as much as now Tasha was, because she was around you a lot and then all of a sudden wasn't. That seems to make perfect sense, would have been a logical answer in my opinion. I do like Riker's response of he doesn't really know why we don't feel this death as keenly as if someone we don't know, but maybe we should. Maybe there would be less war and conflict, and I think that's absolutely true. And that sort of goes for empathy, and I feel that way actually very strongly, which is why I'm against when characters do stuff just because they know a character and they don't seem to give a shit about characters that they do know. Janeway in Endgame. Because she fucked up the whole timeline and ruined everything just to save her two close friends. She didn't give a fuck about all those incidents that she killed or let die. Anyway, I'm sorry. That's going to set me off on a whole little rant. God damn it, I hate that episode. And there's other examples where I brought this up again where they're like, oh, I'm only interested because I like this person. That pisses me off. So I actually agree with Riker wholeheartedly here that maybe if they felt more empathy, and empathy is the answer, actually. But anywho, I mean, you can't really feel every death is because if you did, you wouldn't be able to function as a human being. Like if you read it on the news that 150 people died in a tsunami or something, and you felt all 150 deaths just as kindly as you would if your own mother died, then you would not be able to function as a human being. That is the real answer. But maybe if you felt a bit more empathy for those who died, even if they weren't close to you, even if you didn't know them, then maybe there would have been less violence and strife in human history. Just saying. I kind of agree with him there. Anyway. So yeah, thank you so much for your comments. So my rating for the bonding out of 10 is going to be a 7. Very good. I think in the past I've given this episode a 6, but I think paying closer attention to it and really like feeling the emotional weight of this episode, like all the good scenes they had with Troy, all the good scenes they had with Jeremy and him trying to get him to like the weight of having to deal with his mother's death. And I actually like the alien plot. I think having the alien come in and confuse him and be like his mother's dead and she's alive and she's dead again, that was actually that fucked him up even more, and the episode dealt with that, and I thought that was actually more interesting. To me, that would be more interesting than just him moping around in the holodeck, but that's just me. But I do have to definitely take points away from what I talked about at the start. The thing that bothers me the most about this episode: continuity. Backward continuity, and more important, the forward continuity. The fact that the episode's all about Worf trying to do this bonding, which is completely empty and meaningless. In fact, that scene pisses me the fuck off. I can't even barely watch it, because doing something like that demands that you follow up on it, and the fact that they never did means it's pointless, and there's no point to it, and almost no point to the episode. So it's a weak 7 for me, but I think all of the great emotional scenes and what this episode has to say about death and grieving and dealing with the loss of a loved one are so powerful that they overcome the major flaw of the continuity enough to elevate this episode to a 7. So that's it for my review of The Bonding. So coming up next on my channel, I'll just bring up the schedule here if I can find it. Where are we at? So next Monday I will be doing my review for MCU Phase 4 Part 1, where I watch every show and movie of the MCU and to give you my thoughts on what I feel, what I thought about the show or movie before, and what I think about it now. And of course, only doing the first half of Phase 4 because it's too big to do in one video. And then on Wednesday, I'll be back with another TNG review for Booby Trap. And Friday, I'm coming back with another fresh TNG review with The Enemy. And then next Monday, another new public review for The Price. Wow, no price. Anyway, so that's what's coming up on my channel. Be sure to check it out as I continue to cover Star Trek Next Generation, do many more Star Trek videos, and many more videos and many other shows as well. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.